Mark Rowbotham is going to join us and join you, Mike, in responding to some of the questions that have come from the session. So, Graham, do you want to take over and field some of these questions that the audience have submitted? That's great news. Great news.
Yes, it'll work exactly the same as you do now. You'll receive those goods and you'll send the message. Will go back to the EU to close those down. We won't need to use a manual system to do that. It will all be done online. It's only after the 31st of May that we remove that function.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
EIDR doesn't apply to control goods, so it won't apply for excise goods. So it's only the non-control goods. And my understanding is I don't think you need to apply for that. I think that will be open up to everybody for the first 6 months.
Can I add on to that? EIDR has up to now been used very much on inward processing relief and even what was end-use relief. Originally, there would have been the requirement for financial guarantee, I think, Mike, as it was under the original scheme, Union Customs Code. From what I'm led to believe, that guarantee is going to finish us from the 1st of January on the grounds that we are, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, we're moving on to postponed VAT accounting, which means that the VAT will actually be put onto the VAT return, physically will not be paid. So that in reality, we won't need as such the guarantee, nor will we need the simplified import VAT accounting system to remove the VAT from any guarantee itself. So as I understand it, the whole principle will in fact be simplified anyway, so that EIDR will in fact revert to effectively what we used to have under what was end-use relief. Now, I will point out for excise, from my own point of view, it is better having copious records, because if HMRC do want to examine them, they'll need to see full details of when goods arrived, how they were declared, commodity codes. In the case of excise goods tax codes, it's still better for belt and braces to have full records in place to make sure that any company involved in this is fully compliant.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
No, we will still have transit, so we'll have transit for goods that are going through the UK, transit in the UK, say going from France to the Republic of Ireland, and we will also have transit in terms of things like goods going from the UK via the EU to the rest of the world countries. So we will still operate transit and we'll still operate the NCTS system.
Indeed, to add to that, NCTS will also be used for within Europe. If, let's say, you're dispatching goods from somewhere like Hull or any one of the channel ports and the goods are going to distant countries such as Italy, Greece, Germany, Central Europe, NCTS would still be required under the new system, because there will have to be guarantees in place for trailers crossing Europe, as there are now. And indeed with excise goods more so, because let's suppose that you have an excise operator in Germany that is buying UK alcohol. They would have to make sure that it's under transit to Germany, at which point the import declaration would be made there. And certainly for my colleagues on the continent in Belgium, they are already geared up for transit movements, because they will then have to have a simplified system to get the goods into Europe on a simplified basis, then under the transit guarantee system across Europe to where the goods are going to end up. And given that in Europe the idea is to introduce a centralised customs declaration system, it was originally said this year, whether it'll happen I'm not sure, there will be the need to make sure that all goods are tracked, and therefore under customs and excise control until they reach their destination. Now, that means that an import declaration, because of VAT, would actually have to be made in the country of destination because of the issues you pointed out, Mike, to do with the combination of customs, excise and VAT. So the short term, that means, yes, NCTS will be in existence, as will EADs, because there'll still be the need for the accompanying transit document, complete with a movement reference number. So in that respect, there may be more work to do in terms of compliance and also due diligence.
Thank you both. Graham?
In terms of tranche one, as I mentioned, we're working with solicitors to draft those at the moment. I think our hope is that we could lay those, say, in October. So we would probably be looking to share those towards the end of the summer, sort of early September, providing they're in place to give businesses the opportunity to respond before they're laid in, say, October. And then you've got that period after October as well with the finalised SIs. You'll have a much bigger gap between the SI being laid and it coming into force, unlike no deal. So you'll probably get sort of two opportunities. You'll get the chance sometime during the end of the summer, start of the autumn, to look at the drafts, and then you'll have that period once they're laid where you'll be able to see them and also to make any preparations.
Thank you, Mike. Next, Graham.
The answer, so go on, Mike. You say first, and then I'll add a few bits. Probably.
No, I was going to say, is this in relation to customs?
It's Ken here. Yes, I'm on the call. It was in regards to all movements, realistically, because obviously with our network, we move goods in, around, through Europe, back, forwards from Ireland, etc., both innocent and obviously excise goods as well. So it was a generic question about ENS for all movements of goods in and around Europe.
Right. It's not an area I know that well, ENS, to be honest. So
right. If I can then jump in with both feet, the answer is that the Brussels import control system, Ken, is going to operate us from January the 1st to midnight, New Year's celebrations. ENS and EXS will apply. There's been a reference from HMRC already to what is called the Safety and Security Certificate. What it amounts to is cargo pre-clearance. Now, that means from Europe into the UK, including Ireland, there will be the need for pre-clearance on all cargoes. Now, on excise and control goods, far more than with anything else. It also means that for goods from here to the continent and to Ireland, there will need to be the pre-clearance through the Brussels import control system for at least 2 hours in advance of the trailer being loaded. And in some cases, it might even come to the full 24-hour pre-clearance that is used worldwide, particularly for CT-PAT and the other systems around the globe, because in fact there are now far more pre-clearance systems in operation from the Far East, China, Japan, South Korea, etc., through the Middle East, Dubai, UAE, etc., and of course the Americas, which isn't just US and Canada, it's also Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, and various other countries. I think even Argentina is now coming on board, and even Africa. This is now a global issue, and it means that for most countries, they've been given a deadline of around about 2023 to implement these systems. The EU's has been in place since 2010, and it will therefore mean that all trailer manifests for cargoes onto the continent will have to be submitted to the Brussels Import Control System computer, at least 2 hours in advance of the trailer being loaded. So for DHL's purposes, I would advise you to look at that and make sure the system's in place. Now, I think DHL's AEO approved. This, again, is the requirement that the agent submitting these manifests, as with simplified export frontier declarations, will have to be AEO safety and security approved. So that means that we may find there are rather less agents actually doing the work, but this is now going to be a requirement as from January the 1st.
Yeah, that's
okay, Mark.
Yeah, just to come there, Mark, as well. Obviously, I picked up on Simon, who's my boss, who's online as well. Obviously, we've picked up, or just understand that UK ENES is postponed until the 1st of the 7th, 21, but EU ENS does go live as of the first 21, as you said.
Yes, exactly. And this is why the disparity. So for exports, we are going to face a complete control system as from the 1st of January for goods going into the EU.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, as you can imagine, the difficult part we have is trying to explain to a lot of our customer base.
Oh, yes.
Who've actually operated in and around Europe predominantly all their working career and life, don't seem to understand the necessity for making these declarations and how important it is.
Ken, if you're interested, I have a file on my own computer dealing with the whole procedure of this. If you're interested, I will send it via Graham and Clive that we can then send to you, because it explains this whole procedure. I've been involved in this already for certainly 12 months or more, because in fact I've been involved in the creation of some of the systems in other countries. And I can tell you there will be a need from now to tell all your clients this is going to happen. They must be prepared for it. They will have to submit trailer manifests, never mind invoices and stuff, in advance to you. And that because you will have to pre-enter those details to the Brussels computer well in advance of any shipment, because of the risk side of it that would suggest that not every consignment might be immediately approved. It may have what we call the DNL message, do not load, which means that more information is required, i.e. specific information relating to the consignment, because it works in exactly the same way as the CT-PAT system in the US and Canada. So we are going to see severe delays if traders are not prepared for this. Therefore, not that I'm trying to teach grandmother to suck eggs, but I would suggest you send out an email. And as I said, I will send the details to Clive and to Graham fairly quickly to relay on to you to show exactly what the requirement is.
That'd be fantastic, Mark. Any information that you can provide would be much more helpful. We are cascading it with our customers to understand, but anything external from such as yourself would give it some more clout, I think, and more gravitas, if you understand.
Yes.
Not to undermine what we do, but as you go, I can't see the wood for the trees sometimes, I'm afraid.
Yes, I know.
Thank you indeed. Great, thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Graham, next question.
Yes, it's Excise Warehousing only suspends the excise duty, so goods that are being imported into an excise warehouse have to be in free circulation.
Yeah. Unless they're going to a customs warehouse, hence the CFSP you've already talked about, which means they can then come into a registered customs warehouse, but it will be on the CFSP principle, which means simplified declaration. But that will be the only circumstance where duty can be suspended until it comes into the warehouse procedure.
Yes, this is one of the areas we are looking at under the simplification and modernisation is to go back to what we had pre-EU single market, where we had customs and excise warehouses. Yes. And we have one warehouse that you can store anything in, and we have the same rules and same processes that apply, so you don't have to have a customs warehouse and an excise warehouse. It would just all be one. That's one of the things that we are working with customs on at the moment to develop a single warehousing regime.
That would be good, Mike. I mean, from my perspective,
on the free ports issue, that will become part of the whole regime anyway, because if there are going to be free ports, you'd be able to bring your goods into the customs controlled free port and then decide what you're going to do with them. So that's all part of the new equation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, as knock-on effects on other things as well, because if we just have one warehousing regime, it then brings in the question, things like, do we need to continue EMCS? Because customs warehouses currently don't use EMCS to move goods into warehouse or from ports to the customs warehouse. So it brings into questions a lot of the excise processes and whether or not we need to continue those. So again, we're looking at that as part of our modernisation work.
Yep. Excellent. Graham, next question.
I don't see why not. We're not planning to change anything in terms of how we do things at the moment internally. It's just the sort of the change in the rules as a result of leaving the EU. So if these things are in place and will continue to be able to operate under the law after the end of transition period, we're certainly not planning to take any of these away. So I don't see why not. It's worth getting in touch probably with the people that you've got these agreements with, if it's with your large business CCM, or if it's with HMRC themselves, or if it's with the policy teams. I'm happy to take those away and to respond on them. So if anyone's got any of these agreements or mechanisms that they are worried about, if they want to drop me or their large business CCM a line, I'm sure we'll be able to come back and allay any fears and confirm what we're going to be keeping.
Thank you, Mike. Graham?
Right, it's not something that I know a huge amount of details on, so it's one that I'm happy to take some details on an email, and I will look into it and get a response back. I'll pass that on to my excise lead in the team, and they can get a response back, because I'm not too sure in terms of how the process works and the differences.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Next, Graham.
I think what we'll be doing is as part of our work with customs, is we're sort of looking at what they do in terms of their rules and requirements, and then we know what the excise ones are, and we're probably looking at two different extremes. You're looking at customs, which is more facilitative, and excise, which is more sort of prescriptive and controlling. And what we want to do is meet somewhere in the middle, so that for those businesses that we have that have good compliance records, that we can be more towards the customs side and less of the excise rules, but we have the ability to impose some of the excise rules for those businesses that are not as compliant, or where we've got potential sort of high risk goods or things like that. So that's what we want. We want to be able to offer more of the facilitation and more of the customs bit for businesses, but still be able to control those that we need to. So it's not just going to be rolling over excise into customs. It will be trying to get a mixture of both, depending upon the circumstances and the types of goods controlled and the supply chains and things like that.
One thing I will say on that is there's the issue of commodity codes, because with many of the commodity codes, particularly dealing with alcohol products, some do attract import duties, wines and things like that, whereas others do not. And one of the areas that I always have problems with is, does the trader actually know what commodity codes they're supposed to be dealing with? Because in reality, that in itself should trigger the separation, as it were, or the distinction between excise duties and customs duties. And one of the main areas, because we now have the new UK global tariff, it is very much the responsibility of the trader, both export and import, to understand the commodity codes and to use them accordingly because of this overlap between the two. Similarly on fuel, I've dealt with many cases recently to do with the use of hydrocarbon-based materials for things like lubricants and greases, where in fact there are things like Tide Oil's reliefs involved in this. And it still comes down to, what does the commodity code say? Is it applicable, therefore, to excise duties, or still does it simply refer to import duties for customs point of view? So again, my recommendation is to have a look at the commodity codes and then determine, is there a trigger that says either customs duty per se or excise duty, or both, because that will then determine what sort of facilities need to be there for excise warehousing, customs warehousing, whichever procedure you care to go into.
Yeah, and this is the sort of thing that we're looking at under the simplification, modernisation, and we're happy to take thoughts, because we are conscious that some of the requirements on excise warehousing are a lot more stricter than customs. So on things like, you've got to have agreed opening hours and things like this, and if there's production taking place, approval of plant and equipment and all sorts of things. So a lot of that is quite antiquated, and do we really need that now? So we are happy to take views on that, and where we can, we want to try and remove a lot of these things.
Okay, thank you both. Graham, next question. Is he there?
Is he on mute?
I think he's on mute.
He's on mute, is he? Can you see, Graham?
Graham, I'm here. Sorry, what was you saying there? Yes. No, I mean, it's really, what's great to be invited to join the JTCG and the discussions around modernisation and simplification is we pose the question about the completion of W1A forms, which we've all, as warehouse keepers, completed over many years. And I pose the question of what happens, is the information used by the department? And if it isn't, is it something that could be looked at and reviewed? And yesterday we had information supplied by the department to say that from the end of this year, W1As will no longer be required to be completed by warehouse keepers, which is great, because it's a clear indication that we pose a question on behalf of the BWA, and it's listened to by Mike and his team, and a real positive news, which we will be sending out from you, Graham, to the members to confirm what's been said yesterday. So it just shows customers are listening, which is great. And thank you, Mike.
No, that's fine. And like I say, we're happy to take other suggestions as well. And the W1 form itself is, we recognise as a big form, and it's a lot of burden in completing that. And we're happy to open up the question as to whether or not we need that. So we've already started to engage internally to see, who uses it internally. Does it have to be required for everybody, or could it be one of these things that we say we don't need, but if we want to ask for it for specific businesses, we can ask for it. So we're happy to look at all these things, and where there's no need for things anymore, we will get rid of them.
Yeah, that's great. The other thing we were talking about was the applications. When we all as warehouse keepers apply for an excise approval, a customs approval, AEO, AWRS and so on, if you make changes in your business, you have to go to 4 or 5 places within the department to change the details. If you open up another warehouse or whatever you may do, and it will be great as part of the simplification that there's one place to go to where we can say we've added another warehouse onto our operation, and all of the various components of the approvals get updated simultaneously, rather than having to go to 5 different places to do it. So I think all of those things is a major step forward, and it shows that, to me, that customers are working with the trade to improve things going forward. So long live Brexit, and let us move forward on it.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Mike, as well. Graham, any further questions?
Not sure, to be honest. I will need to take that one away. So if you can drop me a line with some of these questions, I will take that away and get the CDS team to respond to that. Yeah, to be honest, there's not much we can say on Northern Ireland, particularly sort of the east-west. It's the north-south. If you look at the protocol, it's a little bit clearer in terms of what happens movements from Northern Ireland to EU, in terms of Northern Ireland being part of the EU framework and what that potentially means. It's the east-west is the bit that we've not really finalised yet. So that's the stuff that we can't really talk too much about.
What I'd heard, Mike, was that the model to be used would be similar to that of Norway into the EU and also Switzerland, in the form of a pre-clearance to actually clear the consignment to move, and then at the other end, the full entry in records to get the goods into the trader's premises. Whether that is exactly tablet to stone yet, I don't know. You'll probably be able to confirm, but certainly I had heard that was going to be the regime between north and south.
It's probably not quite as straightforward as that. Certainly not in terms of excise. Simply because if you do a literal reading of the protocol, it's that Northern Ireland is subject to the EU excise directives. So the way you read that is that things would continue as they do now in terms of EMCS movements and the duty paid processes. So that's the sort of the very literal reading. That's not been agreed because we've not started talking to the EU specifically on excise yet. So we've not got agreement yet in terms of how this will work, let alone the east-west as well. So, but that's the sort of the literal reading of the protocol.
Yeah.
But that all needs discussion and finalisation with the EU, which is why we can't say too much at the moment.
Because I know there are quite a few issues, in fact, companies have dealt with, particularly Pernod Ricard, because of Bushmills in Northern Ireland, in St Brendan's over in Derry, and then bottling plants that are run by Jameson's in Dublin, because they're all part of the same company, and therefore the need to simplify procedures because of the movements of bulk whiskey out of Bushmills down to Dublin for bottling. So there's going to have to be some form of simplified procedure in for it.
Yeah. Well, what I'm happy to do is once we do have some clarity on Northern Ireland, is to have as I say, a separate meeting, a separate webinar where we can actually do that, and I will talk you through all the different types of movements and how they will work. But that might be a little bit off yet until we've got that agreement with the EU and it's all been cleared politically. But I'm certainly happy to sign up to that.
You made me miss the question, didn't you?
Okay.
Brian, you've got your mute. Could you mute your microphone, Brian? Is he there? Okay, Graham.
VIES.
I'm not sure, to be honest. It's again, VAT is not an area that I'm too au fait with, but I'll take that one away and get a response.
Yep. The answer I give on that,
I will get a response from the VAT projects team on that.
Yeah. The view I've got, again, personal, but I think it bears out with the whole separation between EU. VIES may not be continued beyond the 1st of January. It will still be available within the EU, of course, but my own view is that it is more than likely there will be a need for something else because we will be outside the EU VAT system. So that because of that, we can use some system within the UK. That will be a requirement. But for access to EU, we will not be part of the EU VAT regime. So we will be then part of the global VAT system where, as long as the export declaration has been made, it then becomes an international shipment. So as far as that's concerned, having the customer's VAT number will not be a requirement as far as we're concerned.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Graham, any more questions?
Yeah. I will follow up on that and get a response on that. What I was going to say is if I send you our external email address, so rather than send to me, because if I'm not around, things will just sort of lie in my inbox. If I send you our external one, I'm happy for you to send in any questions, any requests via that, and then somebody in the team will be able to pick them up and either deal with them or send them on to the appropriate team. So it's probably an easier way if I send you my external, and I'm happy for you to circulate that across your members.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, appreciate that.
I don't think there will be any boxes for EU because we won't have any EU AADs that we need to the EADs that we need to monitor anymore. So we'll be taking that section out. What I am happy to do is to share you an electronic version of the W1 so that you can see what it will look like post end of transition period, because we've got that available now. So I can send you that to circulate round.
That'd be great. That'd be really useful, Mike.
Just make a note of that.
Thank you. Yeah. Will forever hold your peace. Yes.
Well, one of the things I was going to say, as well as doing a Northern Ireland specific event, I'm also happy if you want to run one of these maybe in the autumn sometime when we'll have clarity over all the other policies, things like passengers and Northern Ireland. Some of the legislation will have been laid. We might have some of the notices and things that we've shared. So I'm happy to arrange another one a bit nearer the end of the transition period, just so we can make sure everybody is absolutely clear and we can pick up any further changes.
That'd be marvellous. I think we'll take you up on that offer, Mike. I'm keen that we, as an association, the trade association, stay close to our members as the run up to 1st of January. So yes, and if there are any changes, developments, yeah, that'd be great if you could, share that with us and present a future.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
That'd be great.
And the other thing I'm happy to offer as well is, and I've done this with other trade associations, is maybe have a regular catch-up call, not necessarily with all the members, but with the trade association themselves. Maybe a monthly catch-up, something like that, so that I can keep you updated as we go along, and you can feed in questions and I can respond on that. So maybe if we look at a more regular telecom, maybe a half-hour telecom, once a fortnight, once a month, something like that. So if we look to set that up, I'm happy to support that as well.
Really good. We need to make a note of that, Graham. We'll take Mike's offer up. So definitely.
One thing I'd like to interject, because it takes time for approvals to be granted by HMRC, it is wise for traders to start looking at the preparations for full Brexit now, because the longer they leave it, the more time it will take for them to be approved, and that means that they might not get their authorizations through before January the 1st next year. So my advice is to start looking at your procedures now and start implementing anything new, whether it's new authorizations and approvals or whether it's record keeping or basically compliance-based procedures, to start now, so that by certainly the end of November, everything will be in place, because obviously with Christmas coming up, we cannot expect that too much would happen in December. So it's better to start looking at it now and then allow the time for any questions from HMRC concerning any future approvals.
Great shape, Mark. Yep. Okay, so Graham, that's it from a questions perspective. Yeah. Okay, so we're just about spot on time, aren't we? A couple of minutes to go. So it's a shame that Paul Davison couldn't join us, Mike. But if you could share or forward on his slides, then that'd be great, and we could circulate those to the attendees today.
Yeah, that I will do. I'll send that. I'll send the external email address, and I'll send the W1 form. I'll batch them up and send them across. And if you want to send any questions to me that we've not been able to answer, I'll get them sent off to the appropriate teams, and we'll get responses.
Okay, thank you. So if there's anything else, Graham, then I'd just like to say a big thank you to Mike for joining us. Appreciate your input and time today. Mark, for your obviously educated responses to our questions, so that's great. Thank you to Graham for all the hard work in organising this webinar, and obviously thank you for all attending.